Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Hope you're having a great weekend already. Long ago and far away, I did the nightly news for PBS in LA during the 90s for 10 years. And it was during the OJ trial. And a fellow named Domenech Dunn would come in once a week and sit down with Pat Morrison and me and Kermit Maddox and talk about what happened in the trial that week. Domenech Dunn was the guy. Well, if former President Donald Trump goes into the federal court system for a trial, my next guest will be the guy. Jay Weaver is an investigative reporter with the Miami Herald. I believe he's been there almost as long as I've been on the radio, maybe even longer. Good morning, Jay. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Thank you for having me.
Well, Rusty Ricardo said you're the guy. How long have you been with the Miami Herald?
Well, I've only been there 25 years, but I've been in South Florida 30 years. So I was from the Northeast and did some work up there with a couple local papers before I made my way to Florida, which let's just say everything runs downhill to Florida. And when I say everything, I mean all the bad stuff imaginable in America. It just flows south. So
well, we do love that Florida man headline. Whenever anyone begins a story with Florida man, I love that. Mark Caputo taught me that. Jay, you wrote a scene setter, and I have no idea if you've already signed a book deal. Have you already signed a book deal for the trial of Donald Trump?
No, I can say I have not. I have not. No.
I'm telling you, the phone's going to ring today because you're the guy on the scene. Tell us what your scenes. First of all, where is the trial going to be? I'm hoping against hope it'll be in Key West because there's a courthouse down there. But where do you think it's going to be?
Well, it's funny you should mention Key West because it's going to be on the polar opposite location. It's going to be in a small town called Fort Pierce on the northern edge of the Southern District of Florida. And the Southern District of Florida is a rather large, federal district. And of course, the capital of it is Miami, and then Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach. So there are these three divisions. And the judge who randomly was assigned this case is none other than U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon. And she happens to be the only judge based in the Fort Pierce court. And so she issued an order this week for a trial schedule and a trial date of August 14th under the speedy trial rule. And it's going to be in her courtroom, not in West Palm Beach, but in her courtroom. So you might say the biggest trial in America right now would be in this small town courtroom in Fort Pierce, where they may have a handful of hotels. It just is a kind of a inauspicious way to go about handling this particular trial.
Jay, how long is your commute over to Fort Pierce?
Well, that will bring a smile to your face. On a good day, it would be 2 hours and 15 minutes. And so what I'm trying to say is I'm about 15 minutes from the Miami Federal Courthouse because I live very close to downtown. 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's closer to
you poor man.
I know.
You poor. They're going to have the networks and maybe the Herald are going to buy houses in Fort Pierce for their correspondents because there's just not going to be. It's going to be a media nightmare. What is the courthouse like? Because the courthouse is very. I was a lawyer until 5 years ago when I retired. Courthouse was very dramatically. What's this one like, and can it handle the media crush that will come from Donald Trump in the dock?
Well, I have to admit, Hugh, I have never been to this courthouse, but what I have heard is that, practically speaking, it is a better courthouse than the courthouse in West Palm Beach. The courthouse in West Palm Beach, where the search warrant dispute between the Justice Department and the FBI and Trump and his lawyers took place, is an older courthouse. It's sizable, but it's older, and it's really not like the one in Miami. The one in Miami is this glass ship-shaped looking courthouse that has got huge courtrooms. It's got all the facilities you'd want. It's wired up. It's spectacular. But of course, that's only where Trump and his co-defendant Walt Nauta did their first appearance. So the case was probably never going to be there because it was checked off by special counsel Jack Smith as being in the West Palm Beach division. So that's where it ended up. That's where the case was randomly assigned off the wheel to Aileen Cannon. And so we're stuck with Fort Pierce. I'm hoping there are not too many pre-trial hearings, there. But you just don't know how it's going to be set up. Maybe they'll do some of this
Now,
by
Jay,
Zoom.
if in my world of political reporting, if Dan Balls walks into the room, he gets the corner chair in the front row because he's the dean of D.C. political reporters. Do you get some deference from the local bar? Like, does Judge Cannon know Jay Weaver and say, Jay, come sit up here? Like Domenech Dunn had a front row seat every day because Lance Ito liked him and put him in the front row every day of OJ. Does Jay Weaver get that row?
No, this is the federal court. As you know, the OJ case was a state case. And so in state court, there's always a little more deference, and they can accommodate reporters and do whatever they want. In federal court, yes, there'll be some deference to me as the local reporter and probably to the Palm Beach reporter, and then the national media, because they Bigfoot everything. And this is a national story that just happens to be in South Florida. So, I'm not going to get a lot of treatment, but I did get in. I was the third person listed to get in to see the first appearance. And there was a kind of a Lord of the Flies atmosphere to get into that courtroom. And ultimately there were about 30 or 40 of us who got in that day, which was
Jay, I've got to warn you, you just made a literary reference. We're on in Pittsburgh and the Steelers fans are wondering why are the flies in the courtroom? So you can't really do that with Steelers fans. Jay, tell me though, I really do think you're going to become one of these people like Dunn was, where if the trial happens, you're going to get signed by a network. You're going to get a book deal. Just remember your friends. Am I the first national guy to call you up and ask you to commentate?
No, not at all. In fact, after I did an NPR interview, I was getting calls from CNN and a lot of other people. And, it just happens. I'm accustomed to speaking on radio, a little less so on TV, but, who knows? We'll see.
Well, just don't forget those big feet. Just remember, I give you the amount of time. Jay, tell us about Judge Cannon. Have you interviewed her? Do you know her? What's the reputation?
Well, look, I know she has drawn an extraordinary amount of criticism from the left, from legal experts in the way that she handled the FBI seizure of the classified documents from Mar-a-Lago, Palm Beach estate of our former president, Donald Trump. And, he challenged whether a lot of these documents were privileged. And so she did something that she should not have done. She made a ruling that said that, a special master should be appointed to review these documents to see whether they're privileged or not. Any kind of correspondence between Trump and his lawyers or anything else of that matter. And so it was a huge mistake. It was a huge mistake because she made the decision that, she basically said that, the government had a good faith search. The FBI had a good faith search, but notwithstanding all that, I'm still going to appoint this special master. And she got just harshly reversed by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal. And so what happened was she had to eat her opinion, and she got all this attention for being very partial to Trump. Well, her history kind of suggests that she is a Trumpy in the sense that she was a member of the Federalist Society. She's a conservative, but a lot of her colleagues at the where she used to work, in the U.S. Attorney's Office, say that she's very smart. She went to Duke,
Michigan Law, my alma mater. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So she's got smarts. She's also known as a very good writer, but she was plucked out of thin air by Senator Marco Rubio to fill this position, partly because she was, up in the Fort Pierce area already, and she was willing to work up there. And she got appointed by Trump in 2020, and she literally joined the bench just days after he lost the election to Joe Biden. And so, she doesn't have a lot of experience. I mean, she doesn't have a lot of criminal trial experience. She obviously has no classified documents experience, because she's such a young judge. But all that said, she's definitely taken this case. Why do we know this? I have a story that's about to come out in the paper that basically says she was, eager to take it. It was irresistible to her. And she's hoping to vindicate herself for having screwed up so badly on the prior, related, search warrant case. And, none of the parties, neither the lawyers nor, for the government, nor the lawyers for Trump, have filed a motion to recuse her. So it's a really narrow window. It should happen early when you make that kind of request, and nobody's made it. And even the chief judge, it has been rumored, tried to reach out to her and said, look, maybe it would be a good idea. This has become such a lightning rod of a case. You're kind of in the middle of that lightning rod. We don't need to conduct any more, fantastic electricity here and draw more attention to ourselves. Let's just, let's step aside. And it was suggested that she called her. I could not confirm that because the judge, Cannon, and Chief Judge Cecilia Altanaga, would not respond to my requests to comment. But the reality is, I believe that there is no question that Aileen Cannon will continue in this case and keep it and hold on to it unless something unusual emerges about her impartiality in the future.
Jay, how many years was she in AUSA? Because that meant she went to trial a lot. Assistant U.S. attorneys, when they come out of law school and go to work, they do a lot of trial work. So I think she probably experienced in prosecution. What's your knowledge of her years in the AUSA office?
I think she was there. This is speculation because I don't remember off the top of my head, but 3 to 5 years. And I think that she was mostly doing originally major crimes like all the newbies do, dealing with more state level crimes at a federal level, dealing with violent crimes or things of that nature. But then she, was plucked out of thin air because she was really more gifted as a writer. So she did, more appellate type work. I don't think she has a lot of criminal trial experience, but I've seen her on the bench. And I will say, in West Palm Beach, before Trump's lawyers and the government's lawyers in a packed courtroom, and she really kind of handled herself pretty well. But it was obvious that she was going to be deferential to Trump, at least in that context. And it was a civil case, mind you, challenging the classified documents that had been seized from Mar-a-Lago. But she was, clearly deferential to the president, even said in her opinion that these are unprecedented circumstances and that she treated him differently than she would an ordinary citizen under these same circumstances. And of course, the 11th Circuit, no.
Jay, we're out of time. I want to tell people to find you at J.H. Weaver on Twitter. I've put out your latest Miami Herald Scene Center. Just don't forget us when you get mobbed by all the big contracts and all the networks want you on every night. Just remember there's a morning guy in the morning that wants to talk to you. Jay Weaver, thank you. Good luck with that commute. That's really unfortunate. Might have been right next to your house. That's too bad. J.H. Weaver is going to be the voice of the Trump trial if and when it happens, America. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside of Studio North. Good Friday to you on this Friday, June the 23rd, year of our Lord 2023. So glad you're with me. Hope you have a great weekend ahead. Let's begin with, if you haven't heard, the grimmest news of all. The 5 Voyagers in the Titan submersible are dead, and the submersible apparently exploded at depth. So their going was quick. That's the only silver lining in that horrific story. President Biden is backing away from his remarks calling Xi Jinping a dictator. Well, Xi Jinping is a dictator, and Joe Biden, of course, doesn't really know what he's talking about on any given day. So he hit the mark once, got it right, and of course, China reprimands the U.S. ambassador, and Team Biden is running around trying to divert attention from the fact their boss blew up all the good done by the trip, and I didn't think any good was done by the trip, so I don't really care about that. China is our enemy. China is our adversary. China should be treated as though it's going to go to war with Taiwan and possibly other places. We have to treat China in 2023 as we did not treat Japan in 1940 and 1941, a potentially, surprisingly deadly enemy. And the sooner we wake up to that, the better off we are. We do have a whistleblower Friday, though. Representative Jason Smith is chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and yesterday he dropped a blockbuster. And I don't know that legacy media is going to tell you much about this, but I want you to hear Jason Smith himself. Cut number 8, Representative Jason Smith talking about interference with the Hunter Biden investigation that was being conducted by the Internal Revenue Service. Cut number 8.
Not 1, but 2 IRS employees are blowing the whistle with evidence that the federal government is not treating taxpayers equally when enforcing tax laws. The whistleblowers were working on an investigation into Hunter Biden that opened in November of 2018 as an offshoot of a separate corporate investigation by the IRS. Let me emphasize, this was an investigation in the ordinary course of work at the IRS. It was not ordered by any individual, any chairman, or any political entity. The testimony we released today shows the IRS recommended charges against Hunter Biden that included attempt to evade or defeat tax, a felony, fraud or false statements, a felony, and willful failure to file returns, supply information, or pay tax. These tax crimes cover an estimated $2.2 million in unreported tax on global income streams to Mr. Biden and his associates from Ukraine, Romania, and China, totaling $17.3 million from 2014 to 2019. Mr. Biden personally received $8.3 million.
Okay, got it. $8.3 million. That's why the IRS is looking. Jason Smith continues, cut number 9.
Whistleblowers claim the Biden Department of Justice is intervening and overstepping when it comes to the investigation of the president's son. Despite what whistleblowers described as a clear-cut case for tax liability on these payments, IRS investigators say they found themselves hamstrung internally. The testimony we have just released details a lack of U.S. attorney independence, recurring unjustified delays, unusual actions outside the normal course of any investigation, a lack of transparency across the investigation and prosecution teams, and bullying and threats from the defense counsel. This was a campaign of delay, divulge, and deny. Whistleblowers say reoccurring unjustified delays pervaded the investigation, including an authenticating a WhatsApp message in which Hunter Biden demands payment from Chinese officials, noting that his father is in the room. The whistleblowers revealed IRS investigators were told by U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf that because the evidence would be found in the guest house of former Vice President Biden, quote, there is no way, close quotes, a search warrant for evidence would ever get approved. IRS whistleblowers told this committee that crucial information about the investigation was divulged to Hunter Biden's attorneys. For example, even an investigators had probable cause to search a Northern Virginia storage unit in which Hunter Biden had stored files. Attorneys for Biden were made aware prior to any search, providing them valuable time to remove any materials that could be useful evidence. Few Americans qualify for such soft glove treatment from federal investigators. Testimony shows that U.S. Attorney of Delaware David Weiss tried to bring charges in the District of Columbia around March of 2022 and was denied. Weiss sought special counsel status from the DOJ in the spring of 2022 and was once again denied. Weiss sought to bring charges in the Central District of California in the fall of 2022 and had that request denied in January of 2023.
So I want you to go and read Professor Turley's account. Professor Turley, I put the link in a retweet over at Hugh Hewitt on Twitter. The House Oversight Committee releases whistleblower report of alleged interference in Hunter Biden investigation. He does summarize the key allegations. There's a very specific but unverified account of a message sent by Hunter to a Chinese businessman. Whistleblower Gary Shapley told the committee, we obtained a July 30th, 2017 WhatsApp message from Hunter Biden to Henry Zhao, where Hunter Biden wrote, quote, I, Hunter Biden, am sitting here with my father, that would be Joe Biden, and we would like to understand why the committee has not been the commitment has not been fulfilled. Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand, and now means tonight. And Z, if I get a call or a text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I'm sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Now, that doesn't prove that Joe Biden was in the room. It just proves that Hunter Biden is an addict and a bully and a very bad guy. And he was back at the White House last night, the state dinner for Prime Minister Modi of India. So it goes to tell you how American justice works. There are two systems, one for the Bidens, one for the Obamas, one for the Clintons, and one for everybody else. Speaking about everybody else, Donald Trump released a campaign video yesterday, eyebrows arched, cut number one.
Many say don't punch down.
We're going to reverse policies like Biden.
No, cut number one. Cut number one.
Many say don't punch down when talking about people like Chris Sununu or Sloppy Chris Christie or Ada Hutchinson. I call him Ada, not Asa, because of certain reasons. Or others. But sometimes it's necessary to talk badly about those that for no reason other than politics speak badly about you. Otherwise, the people that love you don't know whether or not they're for real. Are they saying the truth? They're not. So sometimes you have to punch down and you have to say what's happening. Otherwise, they won't understand. It's not fair to them. You have to put them in proper perspective, these bad people. You have to put them in their place. People like this are very destructive, and you have to tell the voters what it's all about. Otherwise, why should they be able to understand it? Thank you very much.
So that was President Trump yesterday. Ron DeSantis last night had a town hall, cut number two.
We're going to reverse policies like Biden is doing to try to force you to buy an electric vehicle. That's your choice what you want to buy. I want a normal car. I think that's the best. But, to each their own.
And then cut number four before we go to break. Ron DeSantis last night.
I mentioned that truth needs to be our foundation, and I think one of the biggest threats to truth is the woke mind virus and woke ideology. Some people say, oh, don't worry about this. Who cares? Just do this, that. I care because, quite frankly, I think that being rooted in truth matters for its own sake. Don't tell me that a man can get pregnant and expect me to accept that. I will not. It is not true. And we're
not going to very good, by the way. I think every Republican candidate ought to be saying that because it puts the 1% in this country that are lunatics off on the lunatic corner. And everybody else says, why are the Republicans saying normal things and the Democrats won't say normal things that we all know to be true? Men can't get pregnant. Why won't Democrats say that? Why? Really? Ask yourself, why won't Democrats say that? Ron DeSantis said that. I'm sure other Republicans will as well. I'll come right back. There's a lot going on this Friday morning. I'm glad you're listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. There are a dozen people running for the Republican nomination for president. In case you need a reminder, it's former President Trump, Ambassador Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Asa Hutchinson, Larry Elder, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, Chris Christie, Governor Don Burgum of North Dakota, Miami Mayor Suarez, and Will Hurd declared yesterday. Rick Scott is rumored to be joining to make a baker's dozen. Ben Domenech joins me to talk about this crowded field. Ben, of course, is the editor-at-large of The Spectator and a Fox News contributor. Good Friday to you, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing well, Hugh. And look, I was a little surprised by that news regarding Rick Scott. I've reached out to a couple of people who were in his circle. One thing that I would say that is a little interesting is that was reported, obviously, by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan in the New York Times. They are not typically the route for Rick Scott to tease anything. And so that just as an indication to me of how serious this is, I think that there are definitely people who want to have that story out there, indicating that Ron DeSantis has sort of failed to launch. But I'm not sure that that's actually coming from Rick Scott or his people.
Well, I did reach out last night to the guy who has always been my guy, to Rick Scott, and he said, stand by, nothing to tell you. I'm just putting it out there because it's a headline. That would make a baker's dozen, and that screws up the stage. Ben, do you think President Trump makes it to the primaries as a candidate?
I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. I certainly think that we're going to have a situation here with the overwhelming story being the focus on Trump and everything related to his legal challenges and issues like that. But in terms of what we can expect, as the dominant narratives of this cycle, I think it's unavoidable that this is going to be the focus.
So my guy in Miami, who I will call Rusty Ricardo, you may know him, Ben, but I refer to him as Rusty Ricardo, tells me that that's a rocket docket. Judge Cannon wants it to go. She wants it done. She wants to get rid of the cloud over her name. I have Jay Weaver from the Miami Herald coming up this hour. Do you expect to see the president on trial in the fall?
No, I don't. I think that there's going to be a slowdown, and I think that rocket docket is not going to play out the way that people necessarily want it to. I know it has that reputation, and I know that I certainly think that there's an interest in moving with speed, but there's so many different factors here that I think lend itself to being slowed down in terms of the process as it plays out. And I think that there's more evidence that we have to anticipate is going to come out in additional filings that I think are going to be made. This is not just the end of the story. It's not just that that they're going to go in with just what we know they already have. We already have the indication that there are perhaps multiple interviews that are going to be a factor here. And the back and forth over this, I think, is going to be something that just dominates the news cycle. Frankly, to the benefit of the focus being on the former president, and really preventing the ability of other candidates to talk about issues that are unrelated to him. I don't know if you saw the back and forth that Ron DeSantis had just the other day in North Augusta in South Carolina, with a number of different people asking him questions for a significant period of time all over the map. I mean, covering everything from infrastructure to nuclear power to marijuana decriminalization to transports, et cetera. And he showed quite the facility to handle all of those different things. And yet that's not the type of thing that's going to be covered today. It's going to be all about the legal woes, either of the former president or, frankly, the current president and his son.
Ben, has it occurred to you yet that we haven't had a presidential candidate or a president in a long time who is nimble? W, God love W, my favorite president of my lifetime. He wasn't nimble with the press. President Trump was a blunt force object in a meteor strike with the press. Joe Biden, God love him, the man is infirm and doesn't know what the press is talking about. So when you see Ron DeSantis stand up and nimbly address a dozen different things, it's really quite striking, but I think Nikki Haley can do it too. Do you think it's just that we're used to 22 years of fumbling?
We've gotten used to a much lower standard of capability when it comes to the way that presidents deal with the press, in ways that I think are really sad for the nation. The ability of you to stand up and handle questions on a variety of subjects, at will, and not have to turn to a staffer and to know what's going on. It's there's always the suggestion that occurs when a Democrat is in office that comes from obviously leftist commentators that, oh, the job's just too big for one man or something like that. It's just too heavy of a weight. And yet we've had people do this job over the years. So obviously it's a demanding job, but I do think that we've accepted a lower standard when it comes to people's capability to deal with complex issues and to handle them in a forthright manner with the American people and with the media that asks them questions.
And I purposely left out President Obama so that people would be driving around their cars who are Democrats saying, what about President Obama? He was brilliant. He was smart. In fact, President Obama was awful with the media. He would take an hour-and-a-half press conference and make it into 6 questions and would never answer the question, not nimble, not what you're talking about with DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Tim Scott. He just went on monologues that had nothing to do with the substance. Do you remember it the way I do?
Oh, absolutely. And this is the other thing that people far too often, they confuse different types of abilities with, being able to handle the media and that type of thing. It's absolutely true that Barack Obama can give a speech at a distance from a crowd and inspire them. But that's a completely different set of skills than being able to stand up there and take rapid fire questions and handle them. And one of the things that I think, is really a challenge, in this moment for this field is you have so much of the of the oxygen in the room being taken up by these stories that really don't have a lot to do with Americans and their lives. There's so much concern out there in the country about all these issues, and it's not just confined to Republicans and conservatives. The direction of the country, the failure of our institutions, and frankly, the lack of confidence in the direction that we're headed is very palpable. You see it, not just in, sort of the polls about the way people say that they feel, but you also see it in, frankly, the declining birth rate in America. You see it in the decline, among the kind of faith that people have in the type of future that they're bringing their children into. And that's something that I think is actually true regardless of ideology. It says something about the nature of the country. And I think that we want to get back to a point where we have leaders who can inspire us to believe that tomorrows are going to be better than yesterday. And instead, we are just stuck in this nostalgia loop, that we're going to go back and reverse course and, go back to some time that's non-existent time when everything was perfect. And
you can't,
frankly, I think a lot of Americans are.
You can't get there until you have a president who will engage meaningfully with everybody in the country. Yesterday, President Obama sat down for an endless interview with Christiane Amanpour. Once again, a complete Bobo doll for the president. And I compare that with Bret Baier, who's a real journalist who did a real a superb job, as well a job of interviewing former President Trump as I've seen in an hour. What did you make of Bret? And that's, by the way, what I look for in a journalist. Fair, prepared, rapid-fire question, not Barack Obama holding forth with Christiane Amanpour for 3-minute soliloquies.
Yeah, no, that Obama interview was insulting on so many different levels, but also because he has diminished so much since he left the office of the presidency. I think he's had such a terrible run, but you get the sense that they're going to go from that interview and go have lunch and drink white wine together, as opposed to Bret, where, the thing that is so powerful about Bret, and I say this as someone who, both works with him, obviously I'm biased, but one of the reasons he's the best in the business is that when he confronts people, he doesn't give them gotcha questions. He asks them a question, and then it leads naturally into the follow-up. He asks the president, what we can expect that he would take from his prior time to apply it to the next White House. And then he follows it up by saying, well, but there are all these people who worked with you who are now opposing you openly, or who you are insulting openly. You have these terrible relationships with all these people who you sold as being, hiring the best people. What's going to be different this time around? And I felt like that was just a basic factual question. I've had it on my own mind about, what kind of people are going to want to work in a cabinet, understanding that when they eventually leave, he's going to torch you one way or the other. And that's the kind of thing that I think is important to have in today's journalistic roster. And unfortunately, there's far too little of it.
It wasn't argumentative, Ben. He didn't argue. He just asked, he listened, and he asked good follow-ups.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. So many journalists, they get into that seat across from the former president, or even when he was president, and they just get locked into an argument with it. And instead, I think that Bret, especially when the president starts to repeat himself, when he sort of gets in one of those mantras, I think it's important to kind of shift him to the next topic, because otherwise, you got to throw a log on the track. That's what I call it. You got to put a track on the front of the train and make the train stop. Ben Domenech, B Domenech on Twitter, editor at large for The Spectator, and of course Fox News contributor extraordinaire. Thank you, Ben. Have a great weekend. Come right back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It's Friday. Welcome back, America. Investigative reporter Sarah Bedford is with the D.C. Examiner. I've just tweeted out her latest story on the whistleblower allegations against Hunter Biden from Jason Smith. Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
I saw you on Fox News. I became jealous. I said, wait a minute. She's supposed to be the Hugh Hewitt weekend correspondent, but congratulations on. Are you a contributor now, or just filling in when they need someone who knows what they're talking about?
I'm not a contributor. I'm more like the B or C team, honestly, now and then.
Oh, I've been playing on that bench for years. It's AAA. It's great. Sarah, tell us what's in this news story about the whistleblower allegations. What's key?
Gosh, there were just so many new details in these transcripts of testimony from two whistleblowers, one of whom identified himself, one of whom remained anonymous. To me, there were a couple of standout points, and one of them was this idea that David Weiss, the U.S. attorney in Delaware, is not actually in charge of anything with regards to the investigation, because that's the piece that Attorney General Merrick Garland and Democrats keep holding up to say, well, this investigation is being conducted without political interference. It's completely independent. There's no need to appoint a special counsel, which would have more authority, because David Weiss was appointed by Trump. He's the only Trump holdover in terms of U.S. attorneys, and he's allowed to make any decision he wants. The two whistleblowers both said that Weiss repeatedly tried to bring charges in other jurisdictions where Biden appointees were U.S. attorneys, and he was denied every time. And in the case of California, when he tried to bring tax-related charges in California, the Justice Department inexplicably slow-walked Weiss's ability to try to present the case to the U.S. attorney in California for 2 years until September 2022. A week after Biden's U.S. attorney gets confirmed to serve in that role in the Central District of California, all of a sudden the Justice Department gives a green light for Weiss to be able to present those charges. And unsurprisingly, that newly minted Biden U.S. attorney denies the ability of Weiss to charge. So this idea that the Justice Department is actually secretly running it, not David Weiss, was a really, I think, a startling revelation.
I also want to underscore, Sarah, David Weiss was appointed by Trump. U.S. attorneys are not appointed without the concurrence of both senators in a state. The U.S. attorney in Delaware needed Chris Coons and whoever the other guy is to sign off before he became the U.S. attorney. So it's not like he's a conservative Republican. He's acceptable to Coons, the Trump Department of Justice, and the other senator. I'm sure he's a professional, but where do we go from here? Because that is an explosive allegation. It suggests that David Weiss is not in control and that Biden people were protecting Hunter Biden. That's the suggestion.
That's right. And there's also, Republicans, I think, are maybe going to make some noise about a perjury allegation here, because specifically earlier this year, Garland was asked about whether Weiss has ever had problems bringing charges in other jurisdictions. And Garland specifically said, no, that's never happened. If he needed anything from the Justice Department, he could make any charging decision he wanted. He's completely independent. And these two whistleblowers are both saying that's not the case. Weiss wanted to bring charges on multiple occasions, both in Washington, D.C. and in California. And at every turn, he's been blocked by U.S. attorneys that were handpicked by Biden. And another piece of this also is just to compare how aggressively they've gone after Donald Trump with physical search warrants, with witness interviews, and the extent to which the Justice Department prevented Weiss's team from ever obtaining a physical search warrant for any of the places where they had much more than probable cause to go and search for evidence.
So, Sarah, in terms of when we expect to hear from the federal judge to whom this has been assigned, is there a sentencing date that is firm? And do we expect any kind of intervention by Congress before that sentencing date in the form of a hearing, either in Ways and Means or oversight?
I think it's not clear how much Congress can really do now that Hunter Biden has pleaded guilty. Both sides, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware, David Weiss's office, and Hunter Biden and his attorney have accepted the terms of that deal, and there wasn't a lot of teeth to it. There are still other aspects of the Hunter Biden investigation that have gone, unexplored, right? And particularly that's the foreign lobbying allegations, the improper foreign lobbying allegations, and the influence peddling. That was never really explored. The IRS agents here who are whistleblowers have said repeatedly to Congress now that they weren't allowed to look into any of that. But there's a lot of evidence that's just sort of sitting in the files of the FBI and the IRS that now they could be under more pressure to look into.
Quick exit, Sarah Bedford. In terms of the Oversight Committee, will they call the U.S. Attorney from Delaware, Mr. Weiss, to appear before the sentencing?
I think that could be something more for the Judiciary Committee. But yeah, I do think that is one possibility, especially since it seems like Weiss is really more on the aggressive side of looking into Hunter Biden. He was just stymied.
Yeah, that would be the guy. Were you interfered with? Did you want to bring these charges? Who stopped you? Why and when? Sarah C. Bedford from the D.C. Examiner. Always great to finish my Friday interviewing with you. Thank you, Sarah. We will never say goodbye to Hollywood, America. Good morning. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside of Studio North because we have Sonny Bunch, official movie critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show. More importantly, co-host of Across the Movie Aisle and The Bulwark Goes to the Movies. Good morning, Sonny. How are you?
I'm good, Hugh. How are you?
Well, I was great. I spent Father's Day. My Father's Day gift was to allow me to go see Guardians of the Galaxy before it got booted out of theaters everywhere. And I was mildly amused. That may have spun out, right? That series of jokes may be done. The soundtrack wasn't even good like the first two soundtracks, Sonny.
You didn't like Guardians of the Galaxy 3? Hugh?
I did. It was just kind of, it's done. I don't know that I'll go to another one.
Well, I mean, this is kind of how I think this is how the general public feels about a lot of the Marvel stuff at this point. I mean, I was, I like Guardians 3. It's pretty good. That whole series, that whole mini franchise, is maybe the best of the Marvel stuff.
I agree.
At least the most consistent. But it's just crazy how much there is now. Like there's a new Marvel series on Disney Plus now called Secret Invasion. And it involves the plot of it is basically Samuel Jackson's Nick Fury is trying to stop a Skrull invasion. Now, what are the Skrulls? The Skrulls were the secondary villains of like the 18th best Marvel movie, Captain Marvel, that came out 5 years ago. I'm sitting here watching this show, Hugh, and I've seen all this stuff. I've seen all these TV shows, seen all these movies, and I was like, I have no idea who any of these people are. I have no idea what is going on. Who are these characters? What are they doing? Eventually it kind of came back to me, but it just feels like such homework now.
And you're a professional. I mean, this is the problem. If Marvel movie characters have become the Looney Tunes of the 21st century, at least we knew who all the Looney Tune characters were 50 years ago. And we could pick out Bugs and Roadrunner and Tweety Bird, and everyone knew what they were doing and what their roles were, and they would make the regular gags. But if the universe has gotten too big of the characters, you don't really know where to pick up. It takes you a while.
Well, and look, here's the thing. The secret of the MCU was always that it was basically a television series. It was basically a television series, but at the movie theaters. Each season of TV was, 2 to 4 episodes a year, and there were big events, and you'd go see them in theaters, and, it was easy enough to catch up with. But now it's that, plus 2 to 4 seasons of actual TV every year. I mean, it's just too much stuff. It's too much
All right,
stuff.
so let's move to something else. What should people see this weekend, which is really the first weekend of summer because summer came in the middle of the week?
Hugh, summer in Hollywood does not start with the longest day of the year. We're not judging things by. Summer's been going on for a month now, month and a half. I mean, you could even maybe start it all the way back at the debut of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. But it is officially summer now. We are in summer. So there are no it's funny. There are no actual big movies out this week. Everyone cleared.
What? We lost Sonny. Oh my gosh. Sonny is gone. That's a sad thing. Sonny, we hardly knew ye. And it had that sound of someone who hung up on themselves by mistake. So he's back. Sonny.
Hey.
There are no actual movies that are blockbusters on the first weekend of summer. That's sad.
No big blockbusters. Everybody cleared the path for The Flash, which is terrible and getting hammered by critics and audiences alike. I kind of like it, but everybody else seems to have hated it. So we got a couple smaller movies out though. We've got a hard R-rated comedy starring Jennifer Lawrence, No Hard Feelings. That is kind of a classic, almost 1980s style throwback, or maybe 1990s. Farrelly Brothers. Again, hard R.
Is that for nudity, or is it for violence, or is it for both?
Nudity and F-bombs and everything like that.
All right.
The violence is cartoony. I would not. I would not say it's rated R for the violence exactly, but definitely don't. This is not one to take the kids to. This is an adult movie. And
Good.
it's funny. It's fun. I like Jennifer Lawrence a lot. She's a genuinely charismatic delight. I will be very, very curious to see how this movie does at the box office, because it's the sort of thing.
What's the name of it?
No Hard Feelings. No Hard Feelings.
Okay.
It's the sort of movie, costs $30 to $40 million. Appeals to adult audiences. Is star-driven, kind of high concept. The concept here is Jennifer Lawrence plays a 30-something who, in order to receive a car, has to seduce and sleep with a young man before he goes off to college at the behest of his parents. It's fine. It will be very interesting to see how it does, because
that's not a great premise to get people into the theaters. I think maybe it works. We'll see.
Well,
Give me something else. I'm not going to tell the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, let's go see Jennifer Lawrence seduce an 18-year-old. That's not.
Yeah,
really
well, it's failure to launch is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is a raunchy comedy. So, these things are
not a rom-com, a raunch-com.
A raunch-com. The other release out this week hitting theaters wide is the new Wes Anderson movie, Asteroid City.
Oh.
So here's the thing, Hugh. I love Wes Anderson. I'm a big Wes Anderson fan.
You and me both.
I love The French Dispatch. I love. I just rewatched The Grand Budapest Hotel.
I think that's the best. Yeah,
I love his movies. So I was very excited for Asteroid City, and I gotta be honest with you, this movie does not work for me at all. This movie did not work for me at all. So kind of like The French Dispatch and The Grand Budapest Hotel, it has this weird story framing device. Asteroid City is a fictional town in the desert Southwest where nuclear tests happen and an alien comes. And it is we're watching this alien show up, and the people dealing with it, and the government putting people in quarantine. It's kind of a quirky comedy, but what we are watching is an adaptation of a stage play, and the way the movie is kind of framed is we are watching a television documentary about the making of the stage play. So it's got this kind of nesting doll device where we're watching a story within a story within a story with some flashback to some other story. And I have a feeling if you are a student of mid-century American stage work, there are a lot of things in this movie that will make much more sense to you than they made to me.
That's kind of a small audience, Sonny.
Yes. I mean, and look, you could argue, well, The French Dispatch might only appeal to people who know the history of the New Yorker, but I don't think that's true, because I think it was telling a discrete series of stories within the framing device of here's one issue of a magazine. And it was kind of interesting.
It's also a literary, every literary magazine ever written. Yep.
Exactly. And I really think Asteroid City will only work for those who have a decent working knowledge of, again, the American stage in like the 1950s. To the extent that I was like finally excited when I recognized somebody goes like, oh, that must be based on Elia Kazan, because that's the only person from the 1940s and 1950s American stage that I know can identify. Anyway, look, it is a very Andersonian movie. I mean, the cast on this is just absolutely stacked. You've got Jason Schwartzman, Scarlett Johansson, Tom Hanks, Jeffrey Wright, Tilda Swinton, Bryan Cranston, Edward Norton, Adrian Brody, Liev Schreiber. I could keep going. I mean, it's a great cast, and they do kind of interesting work. It's very clipped and mannered and precise in the way that Anderson's movies can be. And again, it feels like they're doing they have the sort of affect of stage actors as they're performing their work. And it's
all right. We're done with that. I got to ask you a quick question before we run out of time. Mission Impossible. Yep. I saw the first ad for it. I didn't even know there was a Mission Impossible. At what point Is Tom Cruise going to stop this?
Well, I mean, these movies are pretty big hits, Hugh. I mean, they're making a lot of money. I think this one is going to be a pretty big hit too. I think this is it's one of the few big blockbusters people are really looking forward to this week. I think Indiana Jones is going to struggle at the box office.
That's not going to fly. He's great in 1923 or whatever that is, and that's fine because he plays an old man. This does not. The trailers does not work. I'm just wondering whether or not. And does Tom Cruise ever say, at some point I just want to do something else? Sit on a beach, do something besides Mission Impossible and Top Gun.
I don't think Tom Cruise knows what it is to sit back and relax. I don't think that's part of his.
But I mean,
DNA.
Does he ever make a movie that isn't a blockbuster action adventure movie?
Well, that's an interesting question because he really did have. He used to have a much more interesting and varied career, right?
Right.
He used to make a lot of, like Tropic Thunder or Born on the 4th of July, or there's all there.
He could be in a Wes Anderson movie, but he doesn't do any of that stuff.
No, he's pretty locked into the big budget spectacle style filmmaking.
Yeah, there's a Tom Cruise living in Tom Cruise's head that says, I got to do this. Sonny Bunch, I want everyone to get the two podcasts down correct. Am I right? Across the Movie Aisle and The Bulwark goes to the movies?
The Bulwark goes to Hollywood, yeah.
The Bulwark goes to Hollywood. Those are available. Are those once a week or twice a week, Sonny?
They are. They're once a week. So if you just look for them on iTunes, you'll find them there.
All the movie podcasting you need and the two movie podcasts that Sonny Bunch participates in. Thank you, Sonny. I have to talk to Dwayne about whether or not he's going to go on a binge this weekend. Oh, I got time. MyPhDWeightLoss.com. MyPhDWeightLoss.com. 864-644-1900. Dwayne, are you not there?
644.
1900. Are you going on a binge this weekend?
I am not going on a binge this weekend. I am going to go to Disneyland.
Well, the churros are there. Their churros are not on myPhDWeightLoss.com.
They will also be uneaten by me.
You're going to Disneyland for a whole day and you're not going to have a churro?
I'm not going to have a churro, no.
That is actually kind of un-American, and we will forgive Dwayne for that because he is being true to My PhD Weight Loss. He lost 50 pounds. He's keeping it off. If you want to do that, go and find out. MyPhDWeightLoss.com.